Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. Welcome to this live presentation from London. This is a presentation by Camino. We're an omnichannel native medcoms agency. We've been using AI in pharma in a number of ways over the last few months, and we've put on this presentation to share our experience, but also to invite our speakers along to really talk about getting into the nitty-gritty of using AI in healthcare and in pharma. My name's James Turnbull. I'm the founder of Camino. I'm going to introduce our panel here. We've got Tim. Tim joins us as a highly experienced learning and development director at Ipsen. Tim builds on his commercial and operational experience across pharma, roles at Otsuka, BMS, and Sanofi. I asked Tim his reason for his interest in this, was his interest in AI and in his role in this world. We had a long justice discussion, stood over there, for 20 minutes, about how it was really about bringing efficiency. Learning and development can be quite an inefficient process, you described to me, and I'm sure you'll come on to it later. But bringing that efficiency, how can you not replace people, but replace wasted time using AI? So I'm sure you'll talk about that later on. And our keynote speaker is Christina. Christina actually spoke last summer, was it? You came and spoke with us in London. We had a live presentation, and for me, it was really insightful and interesting about your expertise, not about the little nitty-gritty of large language models, but the real world of AI. And you really brought that whole history to light for me, and I'm sure you will today. So your biography I've got here, a true pioneer of AI in healthcare, which I'm sure you agree with, healthcare-focused roles at IBM Watson, which I quizzed you about a lot last time we met, to Google Cloud, and now you're CRO here at Benevolent AI. So I'm going to pass over to you, Christina. You've got the clicker. You're going to give us a brief presentation, and then Tim will be leading the discussion and bringing in the questions from the audience. If you do have any questions, as Christina's presenting, please put them in the Q&A, and then Tim will be able to ask as we get into the discussion. Take it forward.
Great. Thank you very much, James. Again, my name's Christina Vismalis. Really happy to be here today. I usually stand when I talk, so I'm going to be probably jiggling a little bit while I'm sitting, so apologies for that. But as James mentioned, I'm the CRO at Chief Revenue Officer here at Benevolent AI. Benevolent AI is a AI-augmented drug discovery company that we really unite science and technology together to help identify and bring in life-changing medicines into the industry. So very excited to be here and look forward to talk. So I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes or so, and I hope I don't talk too fast, but yeah, let's just dive right in, shall we? So, future of health, right? Future of health is connected, personalized, and intelligence, and obviously data and AI will transform healthcare. When I talk about connected, I talk about really the data. We all know data is exploding, and it has exploded and continues to explode. We have about 30% of growth of data is just healthcare related, and that's growing about 37% year on year. We have 45 billion devices that are somewhat health related that need to be connected. And we have a lot of different types of data. So when we talk about connected, we really need to connect all the different data types to have a holistic view of a patient, a longitudinal view that allows us to understand that patient. When it comes to EHR or clinical data, all the lab data, all that great stuff, but we also can't forget the social determinants of health data. So more of that environmental data and bringing that in, because as a study by the WHO, 50% of patient outcome is linked to your environment. Where you live, what do you eat, what sports do you do, what kind of insurance you have, that sort of stuff. So although we see that, predictors, genetics are a great predictor of health, actually your environment actually matters even more. Then we talk about personalized. So personalized, we need to meet that patient, I like to call them the healthcare consumer, on the journey. So they really are, it's part of their journey. And we want to move away from that reactive care to patient-centered, proactive care. And meeting that patient or the healthcare consumer, as the generations change over time, we see that people are much more focused on their own care, on really being holistic care and being well-being, that they really want to look at different types of, they want to be involved, and they're also looking at the greater good. But meeting them in a different way of working, there's more non-traditional healthcare models out there. Some people don't have a GP, they use apps for almost everything that they do, and meeting them there is very important. Again, we want to drive moving away from that reactive to proactive, because that's what they're expecting to have. And finally, when I talk about intelligence, that's about being smart, right? And that's where AI comes in, that's where analytics comes in. We want to go into really understanding all that information, all that data, to drive a much more personalized experience, to bring in more, not just a population management view, but down to the individual management. So meeting on that healthcare journey. So as you look at a healthcare consumer, and I've simplified this very much, we're down to 4 different phases. There's awareness and education, where you as an individual are trying to figure out information. Guess where people go? They go to Google. 70% of all people go to Google for, 70% of people go to Google for health-related searches. You have over all the searches that happen on a daily basis, 7% are health-related. So meeting people on that journey of awareness and education. We go into diagnosis, which is working with a healthcare provider, which could be a human, could be an expert system, to really help diagnose what's wrong and understand what are the type of treatments that can have. Moving into commencement of the treatment, which could again be a trial, and finally doing monitoring and adherence. And those things are in some way a circular oval type of thing, because you're always looking at, if you're in prevention or going forward, of being, staying healthy. So when I say meeting them at the journey, I like to see how do we really infuse it with what's called digital health superpowers. And with time being very short today, I'm not going to go through these in any detail, but in each of these phases, there's ways to apply digital and really make it much more impactful on that side. Now, how much digital, how much human? That's a balancing act. And there was a study by Tebra survey that basically looked at around 25% of people who actually expect their healthcare providers to use AI, and they would anticipate that chatbots should be there. There's around 50% that are, I still like the healthcare, you can't get the same experience from a system versus a doctor. And can they really do the diagnosis? So there's still a range of feeling that's out there from an industry perspective. But having that right balance is really important, of bringing in the capabilities from a digital side of the world as well as into the human aspect. And I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go on. Again, I want to jump from that view of the patient, a healthcare consumer, into technology. And this list is exhausted. That's kind of on purpose, right? That there's really many technology disruptors that are really impacting healthcare and transforming healthcare. And we all talk about AI and ML, and I will talk about AI and ML, but I didn't want to leave out the fact that all of these need to come together, and all of them are very important to really drive that better care for a healthcare consumer. And there's some really exciting stuff that are happening throughout the tech stack that's listed here. But again, let's move to AI. And everyone that's probably on this webcast and people sitting here, we all have heard AI. We've heard about it. It's been infused to us no matter where you are watching, whether it's news or TV shows or movies or anything, talk about AI. But let's have just a basic definition. So artificial intelligence refers to the general ability of computers to emulate human thought and perform tasks in real-world environment, while machine learning refers to technologies and algorithms that enable systems to identify patterns, make decisions, and improve themselves through experience. So machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence. There's lots of different types within machine learning that can be used as well. Again, I'm gonna keep it at that level for this discussion so far. But I think what's really important to call out is that AI has been around for a while. It's actually 1956 when it started in Stanford. But it's an evolution over time. So we're not in a revolution. I think there's this feeling that, now that generative AI and ChatGPT came, oh my God, it's all here. And that's actually not accurate. We've been working in AI for quite a long time. Myself, I've been involved since working at IBM when IBM and Jeopardy came out. When IBM Watson beat the best champion of Jeopardy, and then a few years later, Google AI beat the best champion of Go. Clearly, games are where we started this view of the world. But that journey has been started quite a while back. And the first area was around narrow AI. It's been called and coined in the industry of initial value creation. And narrow AI is simply doing a single task in a single domain and doing it really, really, really well. You train it based on a lot of data. You label the data. You're doing supervised learning, so it really much understands what's going on. So the pictures here, finding a cat in the photo or a defect on a chip. This is around, it's very good. There's natural language processing. It's still out there, right? I used to talk about broad AI as the next transition. And broad AI was having multiple capabilities in a domain, using multiple data modalities as you go forward. I've changed that to generative AI. I'm still debating whether it really is generative AI or not, but maybe we'll get there or not. But we are in that area of really having disruptive and pervasive capabilities that are coming out. And we're still in that side of things. And then there's the whole AGI, or artificial general intelligence. Robots take over the world. We're doomed. Doomsday approaches. And there was articles even last year coming out that we're only a few years away. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And again, I think we're still pretty far away from that. And that's how we can control that as we go forward. But that's really the evolution of AI as we move on. And again, without defining generative AI with the details of the tech underneath that are there, it has been around for a bit of time. It's not that it just came out last year in November 2022 when ChatGPT was out there, but it is over the last 3 to 4 years that really have started to work. I do have a little cheat sheet. I like cheat sheets because they help you go forward of really what's the difference between traditional narrow AI versus generative AI. So we have the supervised learning versus self-supervised learning. I talked about already standalone models that are labeled versus generative AI is really those big large language models. Again, everyone's heard of large language models. And you use it once and redeploy and repeatedly try to improve it. Single mode, multimodal data, predicting the likelihood of an event versus creating new content from data. Very important. You're creating new content. You're predicting the next word or the next image and the next pixel in an image. Computer processing power varies. That's why companies like NVIDIA are just booming at the moment because it's so much power that's needed. And really an important area is around, there is bias in narrow AI that can be mitigated by the developers or people that are working on it. But in generative AI, you have a lot of hallucinations, which is now, the new word is confabulating. So you have a lot of confabulating going on and data poisoning and biasy. And again, we will probably dive into that a little bit of how to help control that, because there are now ways to manage that better than before. And then the big change was that the channel focus was different. So where we were at mainly B2B, it hit the customer, hit the consumer on that side. Just jumping quickly into the Gartner hype. If people are familiar with Gartner hype, there's a scale of you get really excited about something, a little bit of disillusionment, and then it becomes industrialized. And as you can see in 2022, it was just hitting that point as we were going up to the peak of it. As we've hit 2023, sorry, that says 2022 again, it should be 2023, we're at the peak. And it's surpassed areas like responsible AI. AGI has moved up the stack quite significantly in a year, but still seen as quite down the road. But other technologies in the AI space are already bringing significant value, and we shouldn't forget that, around computer vision, data labeling, automation, and edge AI, to name a few. So where are we 18 months later? And I just, I didn't put tons of content in here, but verbally there's 2 articles that I thought was very interesting. One that came out about 6 months ago. Generative AI will go mainstream in 2024. It included studies by companies like KPMG, which said, 80% of companies will invest 50% more of their budget into AI in 2024. And there's a lot of statistics of this. 2024 is the year. It's at the peak still, right? So remember, we're at the peak of disillusionment. 6 months later, there's actually an article that comes out. So how are we really using generative AI in today's world? And there's different aspects. Yes, it's being used, but there's still people saying the productivity is not coming yet. It hasn't really approached it where it should be there. So still work to be done. There's an American Census Bureau that was done over thousands of companies. 5% are investing in AI today, 7% going forward. So a lot of companies still are not there. As we go on, McKinsey, there's lots of studies. I'm gonna probably skip some of them that are out there, but one I thought was interesting is there's 3 archetypes of generative AI. There's the window view of looking through a window and basically doing as basic as possible. That a lot of companies, that's where most common things are done at the moment. There's the ones that are more for that low level or mid level workers. For example, NASDAQ has a clever research using generative AI that helps them identify potential fraud of banking transactions. Bayer, which is in pharma, has stated they have 700 apps, AI-related apps. One of them is around converting a row of Excel into a Word document. Okay, that's very, very powerful. And then you have more the really hitting the high level, high employees, and there's still quite a lot of work being done. But there is some industries like lawyers are leading the pack around using it for due diligence as well as contract analysis. Investment banking is using it for research already. And companies like actually Sanofi has something called PLAI, which is an executive tool that's built on AI that gives lots of information to all the executives. And the CEO, Paul Hudson, said the ROI was returned in minutes on that. So things are moving here. If we go into healthcare itself, again, there's a lot of stuff happening here that I'm sure we're going to dive into in our talk. A lot of investment happening. Tech companies, startup companies. The money is flowing in, although less than it was a couple years back, but still flowing in on that side. McKinsey is estimating that 60 to 100 billion annual value will be delivered to pharma companies in there. In three main areas: in research, which is where I sit, in AI-enabled augmented drug discovery, in clinical, which is all about getting clinical trials better and faster, et cetera. And then in the commercial space, which is more around the patient and personalization side as we go forward. So those are the areas that they see driving significant value. But one thing I do want to call out before I finish here is that one area that we have matured quite a bit is around diagnosis. And we are at that point of very good productivity happening there. And that's where computer vision is in that productive stage of the Gartner curve. There's lots of companies out there doing so many different areas in radiology and pathology and ultrasounds that are really bringing the value. But we also have to understand that there are still slow adoption in our industry. It is a highly regulated. We'll talk about health equity is so important here, and in all those areas make it a bit of a challenge to move at a speed, right? But I still think we're on the right journey. And just to lift up. So when I see generative AI, and again, there's so much we can talk about here, but absolutely, is it going to help? Is it going to help transform healthcare? Absolutely, it's a part of the puzzle. It is not the only AI in town. You don't need generative AI, to do a lot of the capabilities that are out there today in bringing value. Interestingly, FDA has approved 691 devices that have AI enabled in it. So it's jumped up over 150 in a year. 0 have LLM and generative AI to date. So there's some work that's going to happen on that as we go forward. So just to wrap up, I like this slide. I've been using it for quite many years. That we are in the future of health is really going to go from predicting the likelihood to really having that individual management that is connected, personalized, and very much intelligent as we start to use more and more data going forward. I think that's all I'm going to talk about, and we're going to go into a discussion, I hope, right? So thank you very much.
Confabulating, that is a new word to me. I've learned something today. That's incredible. Thank you, Christina. That's really good. And James, for the introduction. I found that fascinating. I think it's an opportunity now for us to get into a discussion around what you've just been talking about, which for me, it is a new dawn, I guess. And it's something that's going to help us to do lots of things in the future. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. If you have questions, keep the questions coming in. We'll answer as many as we can today, but if we can't answer them all, then of course we'll make sure that we do answer them and post them in the future. Really great conversation, Christina, and I'm just reflecting upon a recent article that I read. It was an HBR article, and it talked about the evolution of Tyrannosaurus Rex. So stick with me on this one for a minute. So it's the evolution of Tyrannosaurus, and it talked about T-Rex taking 20 million years to evolve to be the dominant species on the planet. And the article went on to say that AI could become the dominant species on the planet in less than 20 years from now, which is a scary thought in a way, I guess. And there is a kind of a counter-argument to this as well, which is another piece of information that I heard recently about, will AI replace doctors? And I think the answer to that question that came out in the meeting that I was in was, no, AI won't replace doctors, but AI will, doctors with AI will replace doctors without AI, because it's that complementary approach, I guess, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Digging a little bit further now, starting with big, I guess, and something that you touched upon with AI, and we've all seen the films, Cyberdyne Systems and Skynet, artificial intelligence taking over the world and wiping out the human race. Expand a little bit on what you were saying earlier about that as a concept.
Yeah, it's funny because there is that doomsday, and what I think is actually interesting is when especially last year when AI became mainstream, and all the AI research people were like, "Oh, shut it down! We have to put regulations. We got to do all this stuff around." But you know what? Those guys are actually getting the funding. So you have to wonder if this doomsday scenario is a funding raising scenario, right? Because they're the ones that are getting the most money as that goes forward. So that's a very interesting perspective on that. I think absolutely technology. We keep advancing in technology. If you look you can go back to the typewriters. You can talk about PCs. You can go about the internet. It's just the evolution of technology, and it's how we use it that matters. And do we have to have control over what we do? Do we have to? Yes, we do have to know that. We have to know what we're bringing together. But I think at some stage, is AGI will be there? Yeah, probably 10, 20, 30 years away. But it's probably not going to be there's robots walking around and taking over everything, right? And I think we are in complete control of managing that. And there's a lot of regulations and stuff that probably will come through. Maybe not. Like I forgot which researcher said it should be like the nuclear bombs. I don't know if it's going to be that. It doesn't be that crazy, but there should be something that needs to control on stuff. But I think the advance of technology is a good thing. It's how we as a society embrace it. And we'll talk about the doctor aspect. I think as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will there be like a specific point where that's AGI, or is it much more of a spectrum?
I think it's an evolution, right? Yeah. We're just I think we're just seeing things continually to adapt and change. It's funny. So ChatGPT was kind of built by the researchers. It was the way you don't want to do technology. Build it and they will come. Yeah. We don't know what to do with it, but hey, you guys figure it all out. We've made this technology, and we really are still trying to figure out how to use it. Yeah. So I think that's hopefully the next technologies will be a bit more. This is what we need, but that was a build it, they will come kind of scenario.
Yeah, and I guess that leads on to another question about health equity and healthcare for all, and how AI might help that or maybe hinder it in the future. Have you got any views or thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, when you look at health equity, and I think it's super important. So I think it's probably a discussion we could do for hours and talk. I think there's two aspects. There's access and outcome, and you have to look at equity on both the access side as well as how the outcome side goes. And unfortunately, health equity, a lot of the people that don't get the equity are the ones that are in remote locations or lower income, whatever, different scenarios. And you have a digital divide there, right? So, if we talk about all the great stuff and there's digital superpowers that I talked about and all that, all these digital health superpowers and the AI side, that assumes you have technology, you have access to infrastructure. So the digital divide is quite an issue that has to be addressed on that perspective. So that's the access side. And then from an outcome perspective, what outcomes are leading to that? And are you able to give the right outcome for that individual based on their age, their gender, their race, their location? And what was interesting this week, there was an article around getting on the kidney transplant list. So there's been a formula. This has nothing to do with AI, actually. It's just very interesting. There was a formula that's been used, automated formula that's been used for years around what's chance of kidney failure, right?
Okay.
That a nephrologist would use. And there's the formula changes if you're black or white. So black people were seen to be functioning kidneys better than they really were. So they would get on the kidney transplant list much later. Okay. And so now there's actually in the U.S. A change of having 14,000 people, black people, who are now getting moved up the kidney transplant list because they were not at the right level of the health issue versus that they're black, right? And so that's just so you take that's a automated mathematical formula, whatever they're using on that. You take that, turn that into an algorithm. So how do you ensure your algorithms also don't biasy against color, against again age or race or wherever you're living? So I think the good thing with health equity, we know it's a problem, because years ago I don't think it was actually discussed very much, especially in the pharma industry. So we know it's a problem, and we know when we design systems that we have to be thinking about health equity into the system. Now I don't know if AI is going to solve that, but AI has to be built in a way. The AI solutions have to be built in a way to become equitable as much as it can for all. And there may be capabilities that just because of that digital divide, you can't get the access that you need to get. And then you have to determine, do you bring that capability to whatever market you're focused on.
And I want to come back to that a little bit on outcomes, right? Because I want to come back to that wonderful word that we heard a few minutes ago, confabulating and hallucinations. I guess humans are humans and they make mistakes. And there is a discussion at the moment about using AI for diagnosis and augmenting the human and the accuracy of the diagnosis. We've seen that information in the public domain recently with breast cancer. Now, is there a concern or a fear with confabulating or from hallucinations? I love that word. That word I'm going to keep coming back to. I'm going to say it for the rest of the day, actually. I love it. But is there a potential that there could be the occasion where the diagnosis is wrong? And we know what happens in the human arena when that happens. There's litigation and whatever. What happens if the machine makes that mistake?
So first, let's talk about what's out there today, because again, that's a relatively mature area. There's solutions out there that are doing, for pathologists or radiologists. That again, there's hundreds of companies out there that are they're using narrow AI, right? So so they're using again a very proven AI capability. So that's the first thing, and then we talk about general AI and we talk generative AI and we talk about hallucinations or confabulation. There's ways to manage that. There's ways to build around it. There's something called retrieval augmented generation, so RAG, horrible acronym, which is basically putting generative AI into what it's good for, which is around summarizing information or building information, not doing research. So you basically use one LLM to go to external sources to retrieve the information. Then you tell the next routine, next prompt, hey, use that information. Don't go to other areas. Then you've already come into a much more significant space. Now, again, when you go to diagnosis in generative AI, generative AI is not all about. I don't see diagnosing has to be linked to generative AI, right? But there's ways to manage confabulating. So that's why you have these capabilities that need to be built. It's not just throw the AI at it and it works. But on the second point of what do you do if a system is wrong, right? So what will be the way forward? And I think again there's two areas. One, if you're in my opinion, if you're in a hospital that's using the technology and has tested the technology and worked with the technology, they have contracting agreements with the technology vendor. Humans make mistakes, technology makes mistakes. There'll be liability agreements in that contract. I'm more concerned with when there's the non-validated, non-regulated, non-controlled AI that's out there that potentially people of lower incomes that don't have access to healthcare are going to be using, because there is no control potentially out there. And what happens in that scenario that they take advice or recommendation or diagnosis that they aren't actually able to go back and say you've done it wrong because they've used something that isn't actually.
It's a great point, because I think everybody goes to Dr. Google, don't they? And you self-diagnose, and we're not doctors, we get it wrong. So I guess it's a similar kind of thing. James, I just want to bring you into the conversation there.
I was just going to say there was a study about doctors using Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And they surveyed student doctors, and 99% of them said they were using Wikipedia. And there was a lot of worry about that. And that was in 2000.
Yeah. Not a lot has changed, maybe.
All of those doctors are now qualified
and
practicing. And we haven't had any, Dr. Wikipedia killed a bunch of people, because they're applying that human oversight. I think it's similar.
And we have a massive shortage of doctors, and it's going to get worse, right? So by 2030, there's going to be a 15% reduction, and I forgot which company made that. I should have all the names. But a 15% reduction globally of actually healthcare practitioners. So we have more people and less people to take care of them. So in certain countries, there's just a shortage, and how do you address it? Can you And I think that's where again, systems which are already out there in certain locations are already doing is helping with the shortage of people.
Absolutely, and I guess with the movement of populations around the world that is going to continue to happen, that supply of healthcare is going to get stretched. So any help that can be given to healthcare professionals to do their work is a benefit, I guess.
There was another thing just on health equity that I thought was interesting. I recently learned around the genome is based. The sequencing of genome is actually based on one, ultimately one type of. It's not equitable. It's not going across all the different genetics. And there's a program, Pangenome, that's out there now that's looking to basically really dive into understanding 100 different types of genetic-based humans. And I think that even down to diagnosing, linking that is going to change either, because genetics are a driving factor as we go through. Whether you're developing drugs or humans or people are doing diagnosis side. So I think some of that basic capabilities that we've evolved so much in 25 years is going to evolve even more when you have different things that are happening on that side.
Absolutely. What I want to do now is just have a quick look at some of the questions that are coming in. And I think we'll probably come back to some of this more detail as we get towards the end of today. And I think we could probably spend 2 hours, 3 hours talking here. But I know the good people that are joining us have probably got lots of other things to do as well. So I've got one question here from Matthew. How can we as sales professionals in pharma use AI and machine learning compliantly to enhance our offering to customers, and also how we interpret the data we have access to, so that we can be far more specific and focused in targeting and segmentation? So a very specific kind of sales question there from Matthew.
Yeah, I think AI is already being used in targeting and segmentation in the sales world. Whether you're looking at next best action, which can go under predictive analytics or sometimes AI, using medical information, not just how using more of the biomedical data from that side. I think there's still a journey there, right? So when you talk about as a sales, how do you get to, again, varies by country, right? So let's every country is slightly different, but how do you make sure that your doctors that are mattering know about your medications, right? In some countries you can't talk to doctors, you go through the hospitals. Others is much more direct to consumer. There's all different aspects of it, but there is that understanding that doctor better, and there's ways of getting that information from that side to be very targeted, to have that different patterns of there. I feel that we're already far down that track. I don't know if you have a different opinion on really applying. And I'm going to say advanced analytics. Does it always have to be AI? Potentially not.
Everything, just call everything AI.
Yeah. That's the problem, right? Yeah. So how do you actually can predict the likelihood of what that person is mostly doing and will do going in the future?
Absolutely.
From that side.
But more than 3 lines of code, it's AI. Just it's an algorithm. It's AI. There you go. Especially if you're applying for funding. I think a lot of pharma companies are trying to get around this worry about how can I use large language models in my job by having an internal version. I know Merck have been very public about their My GPT bot, which I think they've rolled out to the majority of the company. So it's essentially a version of GPT-4, of what OpenAI provide, but locks down into their environment, so there's additional security of some sort.
And I think that's the fear, isn't it? That's the fear of many companies. If they're going to put data into ChatGPT, where does that data go? Especially if it's very sensitive data. So I think there's a reticence to do that until it's firewalled in some way. And
people should be smart enough not to do that. People should be questioning that, right? If you're on a public system, especially if you're, I mean, there's difference in Chat version 3, version 4. 4 is just better. It costs money.
Yeah,
way better, right? So if you really, that's probably one of the advice. If you really want to use ChatGPT, you got to go for.
I find a lot of people say to me, "I've used ChatGPT and it was rubbish. I didn't, I put this in, I got nonsense out." Yeah. And I said, "Did you use the free version?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, here I've got the paid version. Try that."
Yeah.
It's much better.
Yeah, of course. The differences are huge. And then you have also, the competition there is pretty big, right? You have Gemini, you have Claude from Anthropic. So there's it's going to continue to improve on that side. But there is that people, I think, do have to be conscious of. It's a public freeware system. Yeah. What do you share there, and what don't you share there? And so I know organizations have shut down. You can't use it, and I don't see a problem with that. I think that's actually.
Well, then all those people are using it on their phone. As we find, I think there was a survey with what was the amount of, is it shadow IT usage of ChatGPT, which is when it's locked down, you go and use it on your phone. So if you've got tools, people will use them. You've got to provide access.
Which is a fascinating concept in itself, because human beings are very clever.
Yes.
And very,
they don't get taken over by robots, right?
Exactly. So I've got another question coming in here. Health literacy is a major determinant of health equity. Do you think AI has the capacity to impact health literacy, either positively or negatively, given the huge disparity in internet computing power, etc.?
So health literacy, absolutely. When I gave that journey of the patient of awareness and education, and as well as when you go into diagnosis with whatever system, human or not, health literacy is critical there, because people if people don't understand what they're being told, how do you so I think it's understanding who you are talking to. Now, when I say understand who you're talking to, does this person even have access to information? What's their level of languages? That sort of stuff. And what language do they speak normally, right? I think all those things have to be understood when you start to do that engagement with the healthcare consumer. Again, whether it's a doctor or an expert system. So yes, I do see AI playing a role in there as we go forward, and we have to make things comprehensible for whatever level of person we're talking to. And so I believe there is ways. Again, generative AI is good at creating content. It's good at creating content of stuff that's trusted content, right? So if you can take, a already content there and, okay, now make this readable for a language person that speaks 4th grade English or 4th grade Spanish, it can summarize, take trusted information and summarize it in a way that can actually be beneficial. So I do see there's benefit there. You agree?
I agree. I was just thinking when you look at a patient, because everything we do is about patients, and you look at a patient from whatever demographic they're from, they go in front of a healthcare professional who talks about how they've used this thing called AI to help with your diagnosis or your treatment, whatever. I know certain people in my family that would run a mile just because it would be like, oh, that's really scary. So I guess that's a social economic kind of battle as well in relation to.
But does the doctor need to say, I used AI to give you a summarized version that you can understand better? Because me as a doctor, I don't speak the language well enough that you understand.
So it's interpreting what the human has to interpret it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you say 25% of the people expected their doctor to use AI?
Yes.
I mean, that seems high to your point. That
I would expect it to be higher over time.
Would you?
I don't know. Maybe it's a question of whether you expect them to use it or tell you they used it. Is there a difference there?
I would like to, as a patient, I would like.
Depending on what they're using it for. So doctors are using a lot for, automation of doctor notes, so they can actually spend much more time with the patient and not have to go onto the system and enter all the information in painfully, right?
Well,
does that bother you?
No, not at all.
No, that doesn't bother me. But I guess there's a percentage of patients.
But it's more the recommendation. So if they're going to a recommended system, recommendation system, Tim has these blah 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 blah, and all and then it comes back with a we recommend you look further into X, Y, Z.
And I guess, I suppose, naturally there will be an inflection point, won't there? There'll be a point where it becomes, for everybody, it becomes, whenever that inflection point is going to be, over the next.
I think the important thing is whatever recommendation, there's evidence to drill back and give you reasons why, right? I think that's the important thing, is the evidence aspect of it. And, I actually trust a system better than a doctor to say, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
I've seen this 100 times, that's just how it is. But there are 100 times, right? The 100 times like me, as an individual, right? Where you can get much more individualized with the technology system.
I'm going to come back to another question. This is one of the questions that we got before today. And this is going back into kind of industry, what industry's doing, I guess. And it's, how can AI be used to help day-to-day activities for medical affairs and marketeers at an individual level versus the organizational level? So really the sort of the micro and the macro level.
I'm going to let James answer.
James, you go for
I was
that
going to say that
that's
the
your
large
sweet spot.
language models are great for anything where you're communicating. What we just discussed about essentially translation. If you're communicating with an HCP, you can create your personas, you can translate your content. But at an individual level, it's really about just getting used to using AI. You've got to put in the time working with GPT and all these similar platforms, whatever your company gives you access to. But you do have to put in the time working out how it works, because it doesn't come with a manual. It doesn't say, you get a prompt box and you go, well, what do you want to do? And you have to just put some time in and go, try this, that worked really well, try that, not so good. And you'll find really good use cases for your specific job. I find it really good for rewriting all my emails, but other people might not.
I'm just thinking about the emails I've received from you.
They're always perfect, aren't they?
But they are perfect.
They're really tuned to you.
Yeah, really are tuned into me, absolutely.
But like medical writers, I think there's people are, there were use cases that said medical writing would just get replaced with AI, and I don't think we're there yet. I think there's pieces that can help, again, automatically. And even here at Benevolent AI, we have capabilities that help generate reports Now, it's not the end report.
Yeah.
It's a beginning report, and whether it's about
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, when you go through all the different phases, you have so many reports you're generating during the drug discovery. So that it gives you a starting point, and then we build capabilities again to guardrail it, so we have all the evidence, so we can drill down in the evidence to validate. But it needs a human to actually
It does
make that report.
Also, I think medical writers are really good at that, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So I listened to a podcast. They were interviewing one of the filmmakers who used Sora. So Sora is OpenAI's video generation tool that's not available to the public, but they've given some filmmakers access. And he was being interviewed on this podcast, and he said he prompted it with like the type of lens he wanted to use, and all these really technical film terms about chromatic spectrometer. Stuff I didn't
Another big
understand
word.
at all. I think I said it wrong. But it reminded me of Tom, our medical writer, when he's using large language models, he's using words that I don't use because he's a medical writer. And he understands exactly the writing skill, like a filmmaker understands the filmmaking skill that I don't.
Yeah.
I guess this moves on as well to approval of content. If you have a tool that can, because approval is a long, I think there's queues in approval systems of documents that are waiting to be approved by medical regulatory or whatever. Is there a use where that can be improved, where you have a tool that zooms you into the bits that need attention because the rest of it is fine, because you spend less time going through that massive process? There's got to be a usage there in some way. If it's not being used already, of course, I don't know.
Surely automatable bits.
Yeah.
Common mistakes, common issues that come up.
Yeah. You just get the red bits highlighted that need your attention rather than the whole document, maybe.
Yeah. And systematic literature reviews too, right? So do you need to always have sometimes two, some companies do 3 people review everything in detail? Can you do some with the technology first, and of course still have somebody there to do some review as
Absolutely. And it's a time-consuming thing, isn't it? And if you look at how tools like that, how technology like that can just free up people's time to do other value-added things that maybe get put further down the to-do list, which, because they're having to review so many documents, I think there's definitely a benefit there. Good. Got a few more questions. Let's see if we've got any more coming in. Nothing coming at the moment, so do keep your questions coming in. This is a really interesting one, I think, which is, and I think we've touched on it a little bit during the discussion, but how can pharma's use of AI benefit the customer, benefit the healthcare professional? So not what they're using for diagnosis and helping them with treatment of patients, but what can the industry do with AI that's going to help the customer or the healthcare professional?
I mean, it comes on to the promise of omnichannel as a concept, which I won't go into, but it's essentially not annoying your customer. If you can use AI to send fewer emails because they're more personalized, or send, highlight the snippets of a video around, send an hour-long KOL presentation, anything like that where you can essentially make it easier for them, that's a great use of AI.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a massive benefit as well, isn't it? Because, you look at how the industry's evolved with contact with sales, and that's what I do, which is training sales teams to be able to interact with customers in the right and proper way, and making sure that is effective. And I think you touched on it at the beginning, James. Training sometimes is a little bit inefficient in that you bring a bunch of people into a room and train them, whether that's a virtual room or a real room. You've lost the opportunity of them doing their day job, seeing customers, and you maybe train them on something that they might not use in the future. So I think using this kind of technology, using AI to identify what they need to be trained on in the moment, is a far more efficient use of their time, and certainly my time and our time as a commercial training team.
I wanted to ask Christina a question.
Yes, go for it.
Great.
Because in your presentation you talked about narrow AI and generative AI as separate things, and I understand the difference. But do you see those as overlapping? Will narrow AI go away? Or is there, like a lot of the use cases we've talked about, I don't know, like could they be better applied with it, narrow AI?
It's interesting. Everything eventually goes away in technology, gets replaced by something else. So I guess there's a period of time that natural language processing, as it was defined in 15, 20 years ago, will morph, right? So I think that, again, the evolution, things will go, but there's still a lot of benefit there, right? Yeah. And large language models today don't reason.
Yeah.
They don't understand language. They don't understand words, right? That's coming, and whenever, that is, but narrow AI does reason. It does based on confidence level, right? So there is different capabilities that are still, it hasn't caught up completely, generative AI side. So yes, I think at some stage, just like the big TVs went down to the flat screens, the technology is going to keep changing, and it will just be morphed into something else, right? I think that's just, but I don't know. If I was a company that invested a lot of money in natural language processing, and we've done that we've done natural language processing for biomedical. I would say the best natural language processing, biomedical, down to, literature in all even the paid literature, right? So we've done that in benevolent AI. I wouldn't throw it out and say, let's start over again right now.
Right.
I think over time, even the use of knowledge graphs, right? Knowledge graphs have been around now for quite a long time. They're still being used. Probably in 5 years, do we talk about knowledge graphs anymore? Maybe 4 years? Maybe not, right? I don't know. It's just going to be, moving forward in that.
I've got a really big question here, which is, I think you could apply both to healthcare and general use as well. This is really interesting. How do I know what AI is good for or bad for? What's the process for working this out? And I guess that's it, both in the general context and in the context of, let's start with healthcare first, in the healthcare context, and then we'll maybe look at the more general context.
How do you determine what AI is good or bad for? I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. I was mentioning about McKinsey has this thing of generative AI go from the hype to reality. It lists out 25 use cases across the value chain that generative AI would be really good for. So there's a lot of information. I guess my point there is a lot of information out there that you can find and research for use cases that make sense. And then you have to say, is that relevant for my organization? But then you also have to think about, as a big pharma or mid-tier or small, should you be building it, or should you be finding something out there that exists to do it, right? Because there is an effort, there's a maintenance effort, there's all that thing, the buy versus build at that side. So, I don't know if there's I'm trying to think if there are KPIs or metrics you could say this is good and this is bad for AI. I think it's understanding where there's a lot of data. And now when you have multimodal data, because now we can do multimodal data, there's a lot of data and you need to have better informed decisions from it, right? And you need to be able, I think that's where, it's good. If you're generating content, whatever area, again, with the right appropriate guardrails, it's a good use case. But, it's finding things. I remember just quickly, years and years ago, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, we were trying to look at HTAs, health technical assessments. Could we use AI at that stage, natural language processing, to generate HTAs? Because, it's a very expensive process, it's a painful process, and we spent, we tried to build a business case for this within IBM at the time, but it didn't stand up because every country was different. There's no standard template. There's no, it's different languages, and we weren't good at language. There's all these tables, and there's, AI wasn't good in tables, so it just was like, no way. Now today, could you do automatically generated HTAs? I don't know. I think I would love to re-look at, I'm not going to probably look at the business case right now, but I'd love to re-look at that and see, is that a use case? Is it beneficial enough? Is there enough value from it? You're going to get enough return on investment for your effort, right? That always has to be part of any business case.
But if anyone's in value and access and they've got a point of view, do post it, and we can come back to it, see if anyone answers that question that you've posed to the audience.
I was going to say that when we've approached these projects, it's rarely the big challenge that we're applying AI to, because it becomes, the whole solution isn't AI, and it's chopping it up, especially where we've got medical writers involved, we've got review, generating content. It's chopping up and going, this little bit, this works great with AI. And in the projects we've done, actually, we found pieces that we were categorizing papers. We tried to use GPT to do that, and it was rubbish. It was like 50% wrong. So we wrote a bit of code, a script, which was just looking for words, and that was about 90% right. So that was much better. But this was October last year, which was, in large language terms, large language models, it was ages ago. So Tom was trying it again this week with one of the new Claude models, Anthropic, and it's about 99% right. So now we're going to take that piece, a tiny little piece of the process out, and replace that with AI. But there's still lots of human interaction and code and all sorts of other stuff. So it's applying it not always to the entire project.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, looking at, I work for benevolent AI. AI has AI in the title, so it's got to have something to do with AI. But AI-driven, AI-augmented, very important, augmented drug discovery. Yeah. We have a platform of capabilities. We've been developing it for many years, 5-6 years. We've identified novel therapies, novel targets that potentially could go forward in the clinic. And like many other companies like us, we're in the, is it working? Does it work? Because you don't know until it goes into the clinic, which is a 10-year plus journey, right? So there's still, we have some candidates there in phase 1A, just finishing 1A. So there's different ways of, early drug discovery. I think it's a great place to do it in. And there's 500 startup companies that are also trying to do the same thing. But the reward takes a long time to prove. And that's a difficulty in our industry because it just takes that journey of it's really working, in the real world is a very long journey from when you identify a potential target. And
that's the reality for sure. We've probably got a few more minutes for a couple more questions. And this is one from Paul. I find this question fascinating. I believe we have to send healthcare professionals comprehensive information for them to make treatment decisions based on the overall data. If a human or AI picks out snips of data, i.e. omni-channel strategies, so it's a question for both of you, I think, aren't there regulatory and compliance issues around that? James, come to you.
Well, there's not for human, does it? Because it's been happening for years. I mean, that's the current system, is it not? Somebody has to take all the science and translate it. There's 250,000 new papers on PubMed every month. Nobody's reading all of that. So somebody is going, this is important, this is less important, communicating that science. If that person used spell check, that would be fine. If that person used a little bit of AI, that would be fine. If that was just AI, probably wouldn't be fine. So it's augmentation, to Christina's earlier point.
And I think again, as a patient, I would like my doctor to have all the information that they can to give the right diagnosis for me, right? And in today's, in what we have today, a doctor can't get all that information without using technology like AI and other technology. Again, it's not a standalone, right? To have that holistic view and to see where, especially if you're into the rare disease space or into, I've never seen this before. Well, gee, I would love to have, a system that helps educate the doctor, frankly, on that side. So I think absolutely right. A pharma company should give, as much information as possible to make sure they make the right decision. Not pharma companies, anyone within the healthcare ecosystem, for that matter.
Absolutely, good. Got a bit more time, so a couple more, I think, and I've got a big one to end on. So a bit of jeopardy for the end there, big one to end on. How can we integrate AI into marketing or medical affairs beyond the standard chatbot tools? You've probably touched on this a little bit.
We did.
But it's quite a specific question.
Yeah. The standard chatbot tools are giving you, helping you write, helping you create, helping you brainstorm, come up with ideas, testing things. So using a chatbot or any sort of large language model as like your training example, as somebody you can talk to, so practicing your content. We've kind of played with it in terms of using a brand story. So this is a product's brand story. How would you visualize that, giving it to DALL-E? And then taking an image that we've generated and going, what do you think this tells? What's the story? It's just somebody, a virtual somebody, to bounce ideas off. And you go, oh, that's not what I meant. We're totally expecting a different visual. Maybe we need to tweak that. So there's it's building it into your everyday workflow so that it's not, oh, now it's time for the AI. It's just something that you're using.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think, again, in medical affairs, real world evidence is a big focus. How do you, tons of data, again, we're talking tons of clinical data or other data that's out there for information. How do you gain insights from it? And that's, again, where AI sits. And it's been sitting there for years, again, of doing predictions and capabilities.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our time. So I've got that big question that I mentioned a minute ago, and then I'll probably hand over to you to sort of summarize the conversation today, and then we can let these good people get back to their day jobs. And this is the big question. Any recommendation for the best AI tools for pharma? And that's from Mary. Over to you.
Christina?
Geez, why do you, that's the best, in what area? You
That's
don't
the
care.
question. Wherever, in pharma.
Well, I mean, I could just stay in research because that's where I sit. But I actually think actually, I mean, I was posing this question to myself. So, you look at R&D, and I've been again. I'm not a scientist, but I've been in pharma for 20-something years from a technology perspective. And it's a very long process. It's a very expensive process. It's a very totally, it's ripe for transformation, but it's hard to do. So I was saying to myself, if you could start from scratch, if you could basically wipe out all the processes that are out there today, and whether you have randomized clinical trials, everything, start from scratch, what would it be? I think the area of digital twins will make a big impact in clinical trials. Maybe not so much in early research. I think that's still it's so hard of a space to say just do a digital twin. But I think when you hit into clinical trials and planning those trials and being able to do, wouldn't it be great if you could simulate 80, 90% without touching patients, and then do the last 10 with patients, right? You could just see that speed change complete. I'm looking way in advance. I'm not saying it's here today, so I'm not promising anything. I'm not making any recommendation, but I think that would just change the whole paradigm, because we know there's going to be a massive, the cost, pricing of drugs is always a topic, and it's getting worse, not better, right? So things are going to change on that side, and how much money you can spend in R&D is going to change as well. So could you really just totally change the whole paradigm of bringing drugs to market with AI as enabler?
So James, I'll leave you to answer the question and then maybe to summarize today.
Thank you. I'll give you 3 answers, if that's all right.
That's okay.
If we've got time. Individually, I think everybody should be trying to use GPT or similar or Claude in their day-to-day. As I said earlier, just putting the time in, working out how it works and doesn't work in their day job. I think from a project level, you can speak to an agency, and think of one, who can help you at individual projects, adding AI where you're doing something that you think there's a bit of this process that can be made more efficient, we can do it in a better way, we can add more value, we can add AI to be innovative. There's something like that. Get your agency to do that. And the third one is like the enterprise tools, what your company's doing, your company chatbot. Make use of those as well. And from an individual level, all of those will help.
So I went big thing, you went practical. Great.
That's a
great,
Which
it's a
is
great
why you're
combination.
here today.
It's almost like we planned. Christina, did you want to say anything in terms of your summary, please?
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you again. Thank you very much for including me today. I think it's we are on this journey. It's a super exciting journey. I just where we're going to end. Let's see. And I think everyone, and I agree 100%. Try things out. Experiment. Get comfortable. If you feel like you're totally lost, you're not. The adoption's slow, right? I think there's. You're not behind, and there's ways of getting up there. There's just so much information to learn about, right, on these things. And yeah, AI is part of that transformation, not the only answer for it.
Totally agree. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Tim, very much for all of the questions and moderating so well. Thank you, Christina, for your presentation. If you want any more information about Camino or CaminoComms.com, you can find us on LinkedIn. We'll be doing additional meetings and events across the course of the year. We'll be posting the video of this online if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. And as Tim said, any questions we didn't get to, we'll contact you via email and try and answer those. But thank you again, both of you, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.